Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Another crazy lady gets into our first story, deciding to make a scene. Not a good idea. But at least we have a story to tell today. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Rebellious teenage daughter gets scared straight by the cops. I live in a great neighborhood. The kind that organizes 4th of July block parties, synchronizes Christmas decorations, flyers on where to buy lights, supplies, etc., and even community garage sales. About 2 years ago, a good neighbor moves out and a bad one moves in. The teenage daughter, who I'll refer to as Punk Butt, likes to sit out on the curb with whatever the current week's boyfriend is and smoke cigarettes. I got no problem with her doing this, but leaving the butts all over the sidewalk and street while staying out until 1 or 2 a.m., talking and laughing like she's at a crowded football game? Not cool. One day, neighbor John decides to talk to Punk Butt and current boyfriend about the littering and loud talking, and she throws a massive hissy fit. Mind your own business, etc. The kicker was that John mentioned the whole neighborhood didn't like it. About 3 days later, I get a knock on my door, and it's the cops telling me they found some of my mail and a bunch of neighbors' mail that had apparently been stolen from the mailbox. Apparently, it had all been dumped in a bush in a front yard down the corner. Strangely, Punk Butt's mail and the only 2 houses that bothered to put locks on their mailbox was not included in the dump. The whole neighborhood knew what had happened, retaliation because of neighbor John and him telling her to stop littering and talking loudly. She wanted everyone to pay. Well, the neighborhood retaliated right back. Several neighbors went to talk to the parents, but they flat out told them to F off and mind their own business. Some other minor petty stuff happens in between this time, but here's where it gets good. All the neighbors report to the cops the time frame when Punk Butt's smoking times are. It's literally a perfect neighborhood watch on the daughter's actives. About a week or so later, Punk Butt came outside to smoke, and the same cops were parked around the corner, just out of eyesight. I can see them perfectly as I'm on the adjacent street. The cops flash the lights while pulling up to Punk Butt and BF. From what her next-door neighbor told me and everyone else, the cop basically told her that every cigarette butt on the street has her DNA or her BF's DNA on it. The city has a $1,000 fine per incident of littering because she's probably not of legal age to smoke is 18, I believe, and her parents would be fined. The cops all but told her they not only knew it was her that stole the mail, but that it was a federal crime to tamper with U.S. mail. Her fingerprints were on the letters, and if they processed her for the cigarette butts, she'd show up for that crime too. Her parents suddenly cared now. The dad attempted to reason with them when the cops, but they were having none of it. The cops were pissed and had no problem letting both parents know that this bullcrap will stop and stop now. There will be no leniency if this continues. I'm pretty sure the cops were giving her and the parents the scared straight tactic, but holy crap, did she piss off her parents. We don't know if she was fined or ordered to do community service. Maybe she got off scot-free. But for the next month or so, she was outside nearly every day picking up every piece of trash on the entire block and then some. My pettiness came into play, and that for the next week or so, I littered my own front yard with extra trash for her to pick up. I love my sleep, so don't interrupt it, damn it. Epilogue. It's been over a half year since all this occurred, and there still hasn't been a cigarette butt on the street yet. She still acts out now and then. She's a hormonal teenager after all, but at least she learned her lesson. And our second story. No retirement benefits? No resignation notice. This happened in 2016. I'm a chartered accountant / CPA and got breakthrough in one of the largest accountancy firms in the world. I was hired as a manager in 2014 after working as a trainee student for 3.5 years in the same firm. I was required by law to complete the training to get my degree. I was over the moon until I got face-to-face with Mr. Lewis. The 2 senior managers who hired me resigned from the firm abruptly, leaving me second in charge to Mr. Lewis. Being that this happened only 3 months after me becoming a manager, I had no idea how to cope with Mr. Lewis and his work style. The important thing to mention is that I was hired on probation of 6 months, which is a norm. After 6 months, Mr. Lewis had to sign a confirmation report, because of which my post-employment benefits would start accumulating. This means Mr. Lewis would have to contribute 10% of my pay towards my Provident Fund. Being the money grubber he is, he never signed that confirmation. I went to him to question about this, and he said the agreement says that probation period can be extended if your performance is not satisfactory. He emphasized that I am not working up to mark and I need to do more in order to be confirmed as per our agreement. According to him, me working for more than 60 assignments in a single year, each assignment can run from 2 weeks to 4 months, without overtime, coming in on weekends and staying all together in office for 2 to 3 days consecutively, was not up to mark. I lost my crap, but I knew he could bend me over since it's as per agreement. Oh, I also single-handedly managed to increase his revenue by 18% in that year alone from existing assignments by renegotiating contracts and identifying unbilled work. 1 year passed and he didn't confirm me, always citing the same reason. My life was a living hell. My hair went gray from the stress and I gained a lot of weight since all my time was spent working. Mr. Lewis left no stone unturned to prove he's a typical greedy and narcissistic B-turd who only cares about profits. At the same time, he was pressured from senior partners to hire a senior manager despite my good performance. My annual increment finalized by HR based on performance was 35% after I helped the firm secure A+ rating in annual internal audit. Enter Mr. Crowley. He was a snobby little B-turd who viewed me as his competitor and immediately started to downtrode me in a very passive-aggressive manner. I won't go into details as this is already getting long. After 3 or so months, I was asked to change cabins and I was cleaning out my drawer where I found my appointment letter. I started to read it and lo and behold, I found gold. There it was written that after confirmation, emphasis on after, the notice period to serve after handing in your resignation is not to be less than 6 months, otherwise amount equal to short number of days of salary will be deducted. Since I was never confirmed, this did not apply to me. I go to 4 other colleagues who also work for Mr. Lewis and I discussed this with them. They were also never confirmed, so technically we were never permanent employees of Mr. Lewis. Keeping this in mind, we started searching for new jobs actively. As fate would have it, it took us 1 year to find alternate jobs, and I was the first one to leave. As soon as I got an appointment letter from the other company, I went to Mr. Lewis and handed my resignation with 2 weeks of notice. I put in 2 weeks since I wanted to finish all my jobs in hand, which was crucial for me both ethically and ensuring I stay on good terms with these rich people. Mr. Lewis goes on a rant as I have to give at least 6 months' notice. I calmly said, "Sir, you never confirmed our appointment, so the clause does not apply to me." At first he resisted, then called in HR partner and went on another rant. I sat there calmly and HR partner listened to him, his face turning red. He knew Mr. Lewis had effed up because if he says I'm a permanent employee, he would have to pay all post-retirement benefits retrospectively, which amounted to a hefty sum. If he says I'm not a permanent employee, then I'm not bound to serve 3 months' notice. So I served my 2 weeks, finished all my assignments, and on the very last day, went to Mr. Crowley, handed over my laptop, cabin keys, and employee card, and exited the building without saying a single word. Within 2 months of my leaving, all 3 other colleagues got different jobs, and all of them went out after serving a week's notice, and there was nothing Mr. Lewis or Mr. Crowley could do about it. Since I was handling more than 50% of the workload, I started to receive calls from ex-clients about deteriorating quality of work and lack of attention. 2 clients left immediately after they got to know about my departure. The incremental benefit I received from switching immediately compensated for no post-employment benefits within 6 months, so it was a win-win situation for me, plus the mental piece. Those 2 years were hell for me, but the satisfaction of the fact that I also met my now wife in that office, and we're now as happy as humans could be. My wife went on to work for another partner in the same firm, who's a very thorough gentleman, and just a week ago she told me that the firm has kicked out Mr. Lewis due to ethical issues, and Mr. Crowley had been denied promotion to director level over non-performance, which effectively means his career has ended in that firm. And our last story. Say goodbye to everything you own. Background: my friend, who I'll call James, and I are in a band, and his grandpa on his mom's side of the family allows us to use his house as a practice space, since hauling things back and forth can be a pain, and we tend to leave a lot of our equipment over there. Up until a few months ago, both of his parents were also living at his grandpa's house. A few months back, his parents got in a huge fight because his father's basically a deadbeat, hasn't had a job in a decade, and outright refuses to look for work. At this point, she's basically had enough of him, tells him to get his possessions and move out. He moves out, but ends up leaving the majority of his stuff in the garage. This is a huge pain in the butt because his stuff is stacked to the ceiling in boxes and taking up half the garage. She gave him a month's notice to come and get his stuff, but he never did. He ended up moving back in with his dad, James' grandpa on his dad's side. Last week, out of nowhere, James gets a series of angry and borderline threatening texts from his dad, wanting to know what James had done with his old drum kit that his dad had left in the garage. He was all paranoid that we might be trying to sell it because a similar drum kit popped up on Craigslist recently that he thought was his. James explains to him that the kit is still out in the garage and that he can come get it at any time. His dad replied that he was going to come get the kit, but apparently still thought that we were trying to sell it on Craigslist and just hadn't found a buyer. His dad came by to get the kit when me and James weren't around, but when we came back, we discovered that not only had his dad taken the old drum kit, but had also gone through all of our music equipment and taken several $100s worth of cymbals and snare drums that belonged to James, several of our microphones, and one of my Fender Telecasters. The revenge. Me and James were rightfully PO'd that his father had done this. James called him and demanded to know why he'd taken some of our music equipment. His father told him that it was payback for trying to sell his drum kit on Craigslist and hung up. Me and James considered just calling the cops and being done with it, but I had a better idea. Since his dad hadn't come back for the rest of his stuff after his mom gave him a month's warning, that technically meant that everything that he left in the garage was abandoned property and we could do whatever we wanted with it. So what me and James did was have ourselves a little one-day-only yard sale of his dad's stuff, everything 5 cents apiece. Word traveled fast around the neighborhood, and soon everyone in the area was coming around to do a bit of shopping. We sold tools, video games, TVs, clothes, you name it. At the end of the day, we made about $20 and change. Everything that was left we donated to Goodwill, with the exception of his clothes. We burned those in a fire pit. With virtually everything his dad owned, sold, donated, or burned, the only thing left to do was go get our stuff back. At around 8 a.m., after we rolled over to James's other grandpa's house, the one on his dad's side, and knocked on the door, his dad was still sleeping, but James' grandpa opened the door. He invited us in, and we gave him the rundown of everything that had happened. James' grandpa was PO'd. He woke James' dad up and absolutely laid into him verbally. After he was done yelling at him, he forced him to give us all our music equipment back and to apologize. Right before we left, I handed James' dad a jar full of nickels and told him what we'd done with all his stuff. If looks could kill, I'd be dead now. But he just told me to F off and went back inside. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.